Welcome, everyone, to this evening's dialogue Alone Together with Martino Marangoni. We're extremely happy to have him here with us tonight. Martino studied photography at the Pratt Institute in New York and taught at Studio Art International in Florence before founding Studio Marangoni, which many of our students know because the NYU Florence photography courses are hosted there. He, in addition to organizing exhibitions, workshops, and events for the school, he spearheaded a program there of exhibition exchanges between Italy and the US. He's a member of the International Photo Curators Association and the American Society of Photographic Education, and he's a renowned photographer in his own right. His work has appeared in solo and group exhibitions in Italy and abroad. And his photographs have been collected by some of the most important museums in the world, including the Museo della Fotografia Contemporanea, the Cabinet des Estampes de la Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris, the European House of Photography in Paris, and Camera Works in New York. We are delighted that he has agreed to come and to present a recent project that he's done, Alone Together, about the way that people live and experience public spaces in different cities around the world. He started his exploration. I don't know if New York was the first city you visited?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, for this project?
I'll tell them all about this, so you're fine.
He'll be talking about the project and part of the project that he did in New York. He was a Florentine photographer exploring the city of New York, much as many of our students are Americans here exploring the city of Florence. So we're really interested to see what a Florentine may have, what kind of experience a Florentine might have had, and impressions that a Florentine might have had of your city, New York City. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for fighting the first autumn weather, almost winter. You're probably, really pissed off that it's not sunny in summer anymore. So I will start reading to, jump start the motor to warm it up a bit. I don't like reading, but it's I don't want to forget some of the early things I have to say. So I'm going to just do a bit of reading, and then we'll get more informal. And so we are here together in this great villa, which for many decades has been a unique site for international dialogues and intercultural exchange. Firstly, in Harold Acton's lifetime. Secondly, now with the NYU program in Florence. And I'm very honored, and I thank the NYU staff and director for being here with you. The discussion I will engage you in is in many ways very appropriate for this place, since I will talk about a book that is the fruit of my life and existence in two different worlds, Florence and then New York. Again, we are here together to discuss not so much my photographs, but how life today separates and unites us all. How today's architecture and technology have transformed our existence, and how the language of photography has changed due to its technical innovation. Although you are here, all of you together, you're all alone in your thoughts. So I want to engage you to share them with us and come together. So the book that you've seen the cover, is the product of about 10 years of photographing. And I've been photographing mainly in contemporary public spaces and architectural sites in Europe, but also in New York. Since in the past 10 years, I have not been so often to New York or living there so often, because I used to have a loft with my brother. We used to have a loft there, and we don't have that anymore. So now I kind of feel separated from New York. And this book, in a way, is a homage to my life and experience and my learnings in, I think, what is your cities, you know. And when I decided to do this book, I thought that I thought that being a Florentine in growing up in this city and going to New York for me was very exciting. And so what I have to do this book is a strange combination of pictures. Some of them are street photography, and I don't know if I have some students of photography here. Do you know what street photography is? So the other side of the book is more architectural, more looking at the space and the environment and the buildings. And usually these two ways of photographing are not combined in one single piece of work. The tendency is that some photographers shoot the streets, other photographers shoot the buildings. Okay? So I've been doing both, and the reason why I've been doing both, I'm going to explain to you, but you're going to have to be a little bit patient because we're going to do a little bit of time travel. So we go and show you some of the pictures of the book as to show you this is very much about the city and the building, where this is much more about the interaction of people or lack of interaction of people in this public space. So, to go back on my travel machine, I have to tell you I was born in 1950, and I'm binational, my mother from the States. And I grew up in a Florence that you can't imagine was so different. And I'm going to show you some very famous pictures of Florence in the 50s so that you know how different it was. Now, this is a famous picture of Ruth Orkin. Oh, no, I didn't want that. I want this. This lady, I have to tell you the background story of this picture because I think you'll understand it. This young woman was studying at Smith College in Florence in 1952. And a friend of her came to visit, and it was the photographer Ruth Orkin. And they decided that this is Piazza della Repubblica. And they decided to go and hang out. But they knew that they would attract a lot of attention. Okay? So the photographer posted herself across this piazza and waited for her friend to walk through. She knew that she was going to get an interesting picture. Now, I'm going to engage you because I'm interested to know from the young students, female students, who walked across Piazza della Repubblica, if you see anything like this happening nowadays. Yes? Just like this? You see 20 guys, no women, looking at you, whistling, like this? I don't think so. Huh? It feels like that. I wish. I mean, I think the people have no time for doing something fun like this. They're all running around doing their stuff, and there's very little interaction. So I grew up in a city where I was already considered a foreigner because my mother was a foreigner, and I came downtown and people called me, hey, where are you from? You know, are you American or blah, blah, blah. Because you know why? Because my mother gave me a flannel flowery shirt, which was not in those days. So I don't want to go on too long. So these are the two friends driving around in the car. You could see something like that in Florence, but it won't look like this. Why won't it look like this? Or it won't look like this? Because Florence has not changed. The city has remained the same. What has changed is the way people move around it, what they do, what they dress, and what is photography good for, if not to underline all these nuances, all these differences. Now, could you see something like this right now? This is Piazzale Michelangelo. Yeah? You see something like this in Florence? Not quite. First of all, there's too much trash and junky souvenirs. You wouldn't be able to find a free spot like this. And this is a Ponte Vecchio in 1950, the day I was born. And not the day, the year. And I'll surprise you with the next picture. Now, this was taken by Filippo, a student of third-year student this year, exactly on the same spot. Okay? So, let's compare. What has changed? The city, not a stone. It's identical. But the people have changed, and what people do has changed. So this is something you would see today, right? Okay, so that's the reason why I did this book, and why I went to New York to look for contemporary architecture. And then when I travel around Europe and I find myself in the public spaces or museums of stations or airports, I am in awe because I have my memories of going to New York for the first time when I was 9 years old. And that was 1959. Our mother took us to New York on a boat to visit her parents, okay? And I arrived in New York with a camera and started taking my very first pictures. And I will never forget how incredible these skyscrapers were. And every time I go there, I still have the same feeling, like what you feel when you come here and find the same kind of, nice, beautiful buildings. I have the same reaction when I go to New York, or in London now, because London has built skyscrapers, and so has Paris. And this is arriving there on a boat and looking at the city skyline. But New York City skyline changes all the time, and I keep photographing it, and it's always different. In Florence, I do not photograph in Florence because there's already too many pictures, and nothing happens that I'm interested in, at least myself. Now, we jump ahead in my travel machine, time machine, and in 1970, I was ready to go study at university. And I decided to go to New York to visit some friends. My brother was studying there, was studying at Columbia. So I went for Christmas. And I decided to stay a bit longer, to spend 3 months and study photography course. It changed my life. I discovered photography, I discovered everything that I'm now doing. And I stayed for 3 years, photographing at a time that New York was, I didn't realize it then, it was amazing. It was an incredible city where photography was in a renaissance. I was having students, teachers who were at the same, I think, level as Friedlander or Robert Frank, but nobody knew about them. My professors were really on that kind of level of thinking and working. And I started photographing on the street. So since I know you all want to have a little bit of, I'm going to take a few things out here. So my first camera was this one here, a Nichromat. And I photographed on the street, taking pictures in the village where I lived. So you tell me, does the village still look like this? Do you know what that is? Yeah. Now, in those days, we only photographed in black and white, so that was what we were taught. And this is on 8th Street. Does 8th Street still look like this? No, it doesn't, because New York changes. Everything changes every time I go there. The village, maybe not so much. And it was a very dark city in the 70s. Maybe, I don't know if you get this through from the pictures, it was also not safe. It was, 72, 73, 74. These pictures I'm showing you go all the way down to about 78, 77, 78. And it was a very interesting city, but it wasn't an easy city. It was also economic crisis, there was a lot of poverty, and crime was, I was robbed twice. Lucky, I survived. So this kind of gave me a very kind of solid background of doing a certain kind of photography that is, as I said before, is a street photography, which in a way I still do, because I think that it's a great way to interact with the city, with life, and understand what goes on. In the 80s, several things happened. I had moved back here, and I started teaching, but I kept very tight connection with the city, with friends, and in the end of the 80s, I was invited to do a year's substitute teacher at Cooper Union. So I went there. By the way, New York was my shopping place. I would go buy clothes and cameras, and because we're very expensive here. So every time I go to New York, they would tell me, this is a new camera, look at this. So I tried. So in the late 80s, one of the teachers showed me his new camera, and it looks a bit like that other one, but it's a lot bigger. And you put still film, but it's a 2 1/4 film, 120 film, and you can take not 36 shots, but just 9 or 12 pictures. So it changes the whole way of shooting. And my interest by then was also different, because I started photographing the city. The city was at a moment of great transformation, especially downtown, and they're building the whole World Trade Center. Also, my brother's loft was on Harrison Street, which I don't know if you know it, it's in Tribeca. So I photographed it started being interested more in architectural photography. This is a landfill where they are now some big, I think World Trade 7 is there. And this is from Roosevelt Island. And as you can see, the skyline is ever changing, so you can go back now and it'll be totally different. And I love that. UN. Then in the 90s, Studio Marangoni started in 92. And we started teaching for more colleges, and we started doing exhibitions. And our purpose of the foundation was to sponsor Italian photography abroad and bring foreign photographers in Florence. And so we did quite a bit of traveling to New York. And at that point, I had discovered a new camera. I promise there was no more, except for maybe, So this is my kind of street photography camera, but with a medium format size, which a lot of photographers were using in those days. And allowed me to go back on the street and shoot around my neighborhood, which was the World Trade Center. It was also the time when they passed the new smoking laws, and people couldn't smoke in the offices. So early in the morning, you go out in freezing cold or sweltering hot, and there will be these office workers smoking a joint. And I thought that was very peculiar. I'm not a smoker, and so I thought it was very interesting, and that it would be interesting to document as something typical about those places in at those times. I did quite a lot of rolls of this project, and I'm just showing you very few pictures. But I think it's interesting because it started off my whole new interest in looking at people in these environments. If you have any questions, I don't mind, in fact. Share. This was winter, as you can see. It was probably minus 20 degrees, but you know, he wanted to have his puff. Now, the importance of photography is that I certainly didn't imagine it then, but everything here doesn't exist anymore. Probably some of these people don't exist anymore. Because really, literally on the World Trade Center site. That's not his smoke, by the way. We organized a few festivals, and we're bringing Italian photography to New York through a network of galleries and schools. We did one in '98, and then we did one again in 2001. And Alessandra, who you know, and I were there promoting this festival. And we had the opening inauguration party at Casa Italiana, NYU, on September 10th, 2001. So we had a big party, everybody came, a lot of Italian photographers, and then we go to bed. And in the morning, I was in the loft with my new digital camera that I had bought recently. I didn't bring it because I haven't got it anymore. But from this time, I had started using a digital camera because everybody was doing it. I was also, you know, wanted to go ahead, you know, and experiment something new. And I discovered that actually the world is not in black and white, it's in color. It's not neat. And this is a room that I was on the phone on the morning of 9/11, and this was what I saw from the window. Now, I'm not a frontier photographer, so I didn't go out first thing with my cameras to shoot photographs. It's not really what I like to do. I prefer being behind the scene, okay? And what I did instead was leave for 10 days, came back when the air was slightly better, and, but I was under shock. So I decided to do something very kind of small, a small little project, which is a homage to the people who died. And the city was completely covered of these very sad kind of funny pictures because, you know, everybody's smiling, but probably most of them are dead. And I did this with my new digital camera, and wasn't really thinking that much for a project. I was just doing it because I thought I needed to do something in that circumstance. And anyway, I'm very happy that I did that. Ground Zero has become a fixation, not only Ground Zero, but I now photograph every building site I see. And it's a project that I've been working for 15 years to go around photographing building sites. And I've, you know, every time I go to New York, I do a few, you know, walk around and see the state of things, you know, and see how much they've done, and I take photographs of the premises. Again, I go back because, you know, I'm so happy when I see a building come up, because living in Florence is something you never see, you know. To do a small little change in the station, it takes 20 years discussion. You know, so when I go to London, like I was in London last week, and I see in 6 months I did a new building, I say, wow, so it's possible. So you know, I have this kind of longing for new buildings. So this is probably in early 2003 or 4. I was going back and forth from black and white to color, but I was really mainly using color film, a digital camera. So this is the newest picture, which I took maybe a couple of years ago, very soon before they reopened the park, and everything's now, I think, is all open and official. So this is the first part of the discussion. The second part of the discussion will be really just maybe looking at the book and explaining how the book took the process of doing a book. In a way, it took me longer to do the book than to do the photographs, because making a book is a real adventure. Any of you interested in doing a photo book? No? Well, first of all, now it's easy to do a book dummy. Have you made book dummies? Do you know about book dummies? No? You can download a software for free, either Blurb or my photo book, or there's dozens of them now. And then it's a layout program. So you fill it with images, and you pay the amount of pages that you have, and a week later you have a book. Okay, so it's a very good system for showing your work and to look at yourself awake and to create a narrative and a sequence. And I had the project in mind of this book, but I wasn't sure. It's always difficult to photographers sometimes are the worst editors of their work. So I did a first dummy, and then I did a second one, and then I did a third one, and always showing him to all my trusted friends and colleagues, and my partner Claire, who's in the back here. And then in the end, I started going to fairs with what I thought was close enough to being a good book. And fairs, book fairs. I showed it to all the greatest book publishers, Tidal and whatever. And they all said, very good pictures, but it doesn't work as a book. Okay, right. So I work on the book, I try to show it to other people, and then finally I decided to go to a different sort of a book fair. Not the official book fairs, but the off book fairs. Because it's now a sort of a thriving market of small publishers, self-publishing books, photographers who do their books, and it started about the time that I was doing this. So I went to Paris, and there was one of these markets, and I showed it to a Dutch publisher, a young guy who only had been around a couple of years, and he looked at it and said, I really like it. I think it could be a great book. I want to do it. So that started this adventure of doing a book with somebody who lived in a different country, who was a graphic designer. By the way, everybody had told me to do a book in Holland because the Dutch publishers are the best. So then we started doing the book. And his plan totally revolutionized all my Frida's dummies. He said, you know, it's terrible layout. I'm going to change it all. So send me many more pictures, and I will propose you my idea of it. Okay? So what he did, he took part of the pictures that I had done in the public spaces with a digital camera, and part of some of the building site pictures, and he used the building site pictures, like you can see here, to create a different path and a different rhythm between 5 sections of the book. He divided the book in 5 chapters. And every chapter is wrapped in a photograph that you don't see full, you only see half of it. And you see half of the, if you see the book, you can, and he uses different papers, which is a very nice thing they do now. The publishing houses, they can use many different sorts of graded papers and colored papers so that the book becomes more of an object itself. And the work isn't just the sum of the pictures, it's the sum of the pictures plus the way it's put together. And that opened really my mind up to a new way of making books and to accept his knowledge and his experience in creating books. So I kind of left out all of my prejudices. For instance, I've only done books that are horizontal because my pictures are horizontal, where he says, no, we want a vertical picture, and then I can play more about the positioning of the photograph and do, you know, different layouts. So, I have this. Yes, it's automatic. So here, these places are anonymous places, although you may know some of these places, you know, and but they could be anywhere, and that's sort of the reason why we decided in the book not to really declare the locations. It doesn't matter. There are very, very few pictures done in Italy, for the reason I said, but here we've got one in Italy for some strange coincidence. But you know, I'm in Venice at the Biennale, and in the one next to it, I'm in Frankfurt. Actually, I went to Frankfurt for the book fair that I was telling you about, and I took that's the wrong button. This picture here, that is in Venice. Don't you love shopping malls? They're wonderful places, huh? This is one in London. Really, you know, terrible place to go. But, you know, what you see in a shopping mall is really fascinating. And here, this is the end of the section, and that and these are the divisions. One fun thing was to find the pictures that would work together in halves. And I think this one isn't a good example. I think because in a way it looks like a picture, but it's actually 2 half pictures. So I'm not going to comment every picture because you go on for long. But if you have questions or comments, I think we could start. I would like to, interact with you a bit on what I've said, and we can, share the subject. Otherwise, I'm going to start asking you questions. Yep.
When you take photos, do you ever plan photo shoots, or do you just kind of shoot what strikes you in a city or in a setting?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I at this point I know pretty much what I'm looking for, and that I'm. It's like fishing. Do you go fishing? I've never been fishing. but I know that my teacher at Pratt taught me that photographing is like going fishing, because you have to know exactly where the fish come by, wait, and then at the right moment you know how to throw the, I don't even know how to call it, whatever.
Cast.
Huh?
Cast.
Yeah, okay, we've got a fisherman here. And you know, it's like something Zen, you catch the fish. And the photographer has the same ability to predict where his bait, where his fish will come and have the right bait and catch it. And sometimes, in fact, if it becomes too easy, and that kind of, you know, it's a danger, because you know exactly where, you know, like my smokers pictures, after a while I knew exactly when to find the smoking guys under the towers. And I go back to places. This is a place in Paris I discovered recently, because I go on a nice walk along the area of the Bastille. There's a high walk, a bit like in New York. And in this garden, there's always people doing exercises or something. So I go there every time I go to Paris, because I know that there'll be something interesting going there. So here, the graphic designer, Rob, I'll call him Rob because that's his name, he was very concerned on making the sequence surprising and not too repetitive, which is what my dummy was. And because, you know, the photographer tends to put all of his good eggs in the basket, and it becomes boring. And it took me a long time to understand that sometimes you really have to remove some of your good eggs, put some less good eggs, because it creates a narrative and a flow which makes a better book. Not that these pictures are boring, by the way. I'm not implying that these pictures are boring, although some of you may think so. And I would like you to raise your hand if you think these pictures are boring. It will not offend me, I promise you. Because they're probably boring for a lot of people, but you know, I think that pictures get more interesting while you look at them more and more. But initially, it's taken me a long time to appreciate some photographers that initially I thought they were really boring. Why would they photograph a dump, you know? Where now I'm obsessed with, you know, building sites. I think this guy here on Worcester Street is terrific. The way he's kind of caught in this little kind of, you know, and I find it an existential image about being in middle of people, but isolated. And the reason of the title is exactly that, because I think that modern society today is totally isolated, because people connect themselves with maybe devices, but they don't talk to each other. Also because the architecture that is built today by these huge firms, international firms that work globally, they build buildings and centers which are really sort of geared to get the people from point A to point Z as fast as possible with no distractions, to go to your work office or to go to your shopping center. And there's no place to really kind of mix and get to know people, like in Piazza Santo Spirito, for instance, you know? That's what, in a way, we don't have anymore. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that when I was looking for a title, Claire was always good with giving me ideas of titles. And Alone Together, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't already been used by other photographers. So I did a search. And I found a book called Alone Together, and it's here. And the coincidence is that it's about totally different things than my pictures, but there's something that does coincide. because this is why we expect more from technology and less from each other. Sherry Turkle is a PhD scholar from Harvard. He wrote a book of a long research, case histories of how the people your age are now totally dependent on your devices to communicate. And if you look at my pictures closely, you see that everybody now has one of those things in their hand, and they're talking to somebody or they're texting. So it confirmed that that was a good title, because not just the architecture, but the technology has made it so that our interrelationships in the public space has really changed from 1950. So you go out, nobody picks you up anymore. It's, in a way, it's maybe good. In a way, it's maybe we've lost something. I'm not really condemning anything. I'm just kind of looking.
So, if I may, how visible or invisible were you when you were taking these pictures? In other words, did you go out of your way to make yourself less conspicuous, or just you were out there with your camera and everybody would see what you were doing?
Some of these projects were commissioned, but not very many. I travel a lot for work, for the school, for my own projects, and so when I travel, I always bring my camera, and I know where my fish fry, and I make a deliberate detour if I know that there's a specific place that I want to check out.
I was wondering how physically visible you were to the subjects.
Oh, yeah, no,
yes,
no, okay. Oh, I had not, sorry. Yes, I tried not to be seen, so I have some techniques. The easiest is to go up high and look down. That way they can't chase me. Otherwise, the other way is I take this camera, like that, walk around, and take a picture. And it takes a bit of practice. No, this is, I took the wrong camera. This, you can't do it with this one. But you can do it with this one. And you can do it certainly with the digital. And now I have a little camera, which I didn't bring, which has a little back which you tilt, and you can use as a looking down. And then I control the composition too, because I am a bit fussy about composition and when lines being straight, you know. And but I think there are ways, and I certainly don't look at the person that I want to photograph, because otherwise they get uptight. I know I'm doing something maybe wrong. I'm stealing their. Yes, George.
In some of the early work you showed us, I saw images that would have fit perfectly into this book of yours. So I'm asking the question, when you passed over to color photography primarily, what is it that changed? What makes making pictures in color different for you than making pictures in black and white?
Well, I think the world has changed. And I think in the 1950s, there was not that much color. In fact, to my students, I show 2 photographs done by Joe Meyrowitz in the early 60s. One in Paris and one in I think in Spain. And the one in Spain is in black and white, and the one in Paris is in color. And because, you remember, you were at his talk. In those days, he was going around with 2 cameras. Because because the color was for business and the black and white was for art. And you look at the 2 pictures, and the black and white is is better. It's a better picture, not because because the other one has bad colors. It's muddy brown, muddy this, muddy that, and there's not a singular interesting color. Good colors came up really no sooner than the 70s, late 70s, but not until the 90s that color photography realized that you needed color to describe the season, because the season, determined probably by certain kind of fashions in the industry, they change colors very rapidly, and the pictures that you could take in color in the 80s and the 90s will look different. If you do it in black and white, you are subtracting information which is vital to the understanding of when your pictures was taken. Therefore, we don't know when the picture was taken. And for this kind of photography, I think it's quite important that, you know, the date. Well, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, it's a conversation you and I we should have a lot, because, you know, like you, I was born and raised in the black and white darkroom and did it for a long time. But I think that the world has changed, and the techniques have changed. And when I discovered with a digital camera that I could take pictures in color, then I think the subtleties, there are subtle differences in the colors now that change all the time. Oh, there's one picture in Milan here. That's in Milan, building that new, in fact, that's an area which is interesting. Stazione Garibaldi, that whole area. And this one, yeah, this could be in black and white, it's true. Although there is a bit of color here, and a guy walking who's got color clothes.
Do you see ever, not ever, but do you see a return to film photography now in the present day as a viable medium?
I haven't got time. I really do not have time. And I've already overloaded, and digital has saved me. You know, I wouldn't have been able to do all this work if I didn't discover digital photography, because I can do it on a train. I can download on my computer and work on it. I have nothing against using film, and it's lovely. It's a very romantic, but in a way it's like going around with the 1950s Cinquecento, you know. Sure, nice, but does it work? How many of you have an old beaten down Cinquecento?
My dad.
Yeah. He's a romantic, nostalgic. Photography is not for nostalgics, because it keeps going ahead, maybe too fast. You know, I'm not completely happy about digital. I'm not a fanatic. It has its downsides. But, I mean, it's like people who listen to LPs. Fine, come on. You know, you want to listen to scratches? But thank you for the question. I was hoping somebody would ask that.
So you mentioned that the Dutch publisher wanted vertical images, and you had more horizontal ones. So what did you do? Did you crop the horizontal ones?
Maybe if I said that, I was wrong. What I meant is that he wanted a vertical book, and therefore, since the pictures are horizontal, I never take vertical pictures. And no, it's not true. Now with my iPhone, I only take vertical pictures. I take only horizontal pictures because I think that it expresses more what I want to see. Vertical is it's a whole different media, and so no, I did. If I said that, I was wrong. Now this is one of the few commissioned jobs I did. I was in Frankfurt doing a job for a corporation photographing office spaces. So I saw this amazing place. I spent an hour looking inside these. Did I say that I'm a voyeur? Maybe not, but I write it in my essay, in my book. I really like to spy, you know, like, you know that film Rear Window? Whose film is it? Oh, good. So I love that film. It probably influenced me. And I think it's very interesting to look at people when they can't see you. Weird, huh? So this was one of the cases I could do that. And I was paid for it. So, well, here too. This is all in London. I spent quite a bit of time in London because Claire's, my partner's mother, has a loft in the Barbican. So I go there, and the Barbican is ideal place for spying at white-collar workers. That's in New York. Do you know where? You should know this blue line. No? It's, I think, 24th Street in Chelsea, where all the galleries are. And I was going to see Julie Sauls, who's one of the galleries who hosted one of the shows. So I always go down that street. And it was a lucky shot. Like for a fisherman. This is one of my favorite architects. I've tried to photograph his buildings as much as possible. It's Foster, English architect, and he did this Gurkle in London. He's going to do, if it ever comes through, the station in Florence, maybe in 20 years. And these also are in London. Another one of my favorite buildings that I photographed is this, quite a few pictures in it. The Bibliothèque François Mitterrand in Paris, the new one. It's down the Seine, and it's absolutely a gorgeous building. Unfortunately, not very much, there isn't, I mean, there's maybe a fantastic building and 99 really mediocre ones around. But when you see a good one, great. So, time is up. 1902. And the book is nearly finished. This is one of my favorite pots in the world. It's the Apple Store. And I'm going to go see a new one in Florence tomorrow. It's a perfect place for me because I can look down, interesting light, people I usually like because they're Apple fans. And I don't feel so alone in an Apple store. Isn't that weird? You have to have a group, belong to a group. I guess that's what people do. Do you belong to groups? He doesn't belong to any group. And stations are fun. But as you can see, the layout is very original. Any comments about the layout? Somebody says, only one person told me that was horrible. And you know who it was? It was Joel Marowitz. He said, they just did not do good service to you. They've ruined your book. I respect that thought. He's a wonderful photographer, a good friend. But you know, again, this is Paris, that library, and then Holland. Holland is my oldest son lives in Holland for about 6 years. I know my students are going to laugh, but I keep telling all my students to go live in Holland because they have a working subway that works, and the buses and trains run all night, and they're punctual, and they're cheap. This is Paris airport. Great place. I love it. And here you have a guy on the phone and an old couple holding hands. You're a lucky shot. And the lady on the left is very puzzled by a piece of contemporary art in the Berlin Museum. Let's see if, you've seen this picture before, actually. Let's see how many, this picture here you've seen before. Any memories of it? It's it's on the Hudson, downtown. And that's also. Okay, any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you find it, like, what's your experience when you compare it to when you take photos of buildings compared to people? Like, from buildings to people, when you take photographs of them, what's your experience and the difference between the two subjects?
I'm not sure I've thought about it that way. I sometimes do them, obviously not in the same picture. I only carry one camera, but I get, I get inspired by wherever I am, and sometimes I do both together, and then I separate them at afterwards. Or it's a question of editing, I guess. And maybe it's not even always that separate. Sometimes they both, they overlap. Here, you saw that space before in Paris. Different season, different gymnastics. They're doing Tai Chi, yes?
Of all the cities you've ever been to, where is your favorite to shoot?
My favorite city?
To shoot, yeah. To take pictures.
New York.
Oh.
Crazy place. Yeah, I mean, it's also because it keeps changing, yes?
What's your favorite neighborhood in New York?
Depends to do what?
To watch people.
Huh? To watch people? Well, the World Trade Center.
Have you seen the movie Her? It's about...
I missed it, and then I missed it again, but I can download it. But then somebody told me it was too stupid. And it discouraged me, and I believe them, but probably I should, because I know the subject. And I think it's a very important subject. I think that we are all much too much controlled by these devices, starting from myself.
Because one of the photographs that you showed was like really reminiscent to the movie, where like it's a group of people, but everyone's like by themselves, not interacting. And I'm wondering, like, if you think that there's a shift that's gonna continue that way, or if we're gonna like reverse back to a more communicative style.
Is that a question?
Yeah. Like, so do you think that we're gonna like keep going in this trend, or we're gonna revert back to like more interaction with people?
I have to look at my sphere, my glass sphere. I think we'll probably go back and forth. I think, I was looking at how many people, our youngest son, who's 18, he refuses to have anything that is technological. He hates it. He prefers going on a bicycle, listening to LPs, and what else? I don't know. And he's very sane and he's very aware of the danger of getting caught up in all this network and Facebook and blah blah and everything. And he has a point. How much of your life do you spend doing Facebook? I'm not, I try to control it, but there are people who are totally controlled by it, and the communication between people should be probably balanced a little more, that you belong to a real group rather than a 2,500 fake friends. Do you agree? How many don't agree here? Nobody wants to say, yeah, I do. So where is this place here? Come on, you're cultured people. I want to have one, yeah, I know you know. Where is this place? The English people know, always. British Museum. That, again, by Foster, one of my favorite architects. Amazing place. And there's my favorite library. And that's my favorite Platz, not Platz, it's, what is it in German? Platz. Thank you. In Berlin, Potsdamer Platz. Renzo Piano did a wonderful thing. He created this grass hill with seesaws and playgrounds between where the two walls were. A symbolic genius, because it's really used now for playing and for having picnics. And so I spent hours there looking at it, and this is a really successful public space, but you need a good architect to do that. Okay, so that's it. Now, I know you're all very eager to buy my cameras, but they're not for sale. But instead, if you are interested in a copy of a book, I have a few copies. We got time, 5 minutes for more questions, or are you done? You've been very good.
I was just wondering what your view is on Instagram and the way it's making photography very accessible to a lot of people, and if you think that's going to change the landscape of the discipline or not.
You don't think it's accessible to a lot of people?
Well, I think it wasn't as accessible, and now that Instagram exists, a lot of people take more of a route to have kind of taken Instagram as a way to pick up photography, and have become interested in photography because of the way Instagram makes it accessible, and the way you can edit photos quickly, and the way it's user-friendly.
Is that a part of your question, or is that?
Yeah, I was just wondering what you think about how it's become so accessible through that.
I have nothing against it, and as in a principle, I think most of the stuff that goes on is crap, but I think it's fantastic. I think it's really fantastic. But I think that people will be taking pictures more than writing in a way. It's a new language. That's why I think it's very important that you take a photo class and a history of photography class, because it's something that you have to understand. It's not, it's a strong media that carries a lot of political weight, and people have to know how to decipher images. As I said before, I think but again, I think that in order to go deep, you also have to be complicated. And if it's too easy, you don't go very deep. And so you need to have the culture and the alphabet of the media. You get it? Yes, Professor Reinhardt.
Hi. So you have been working for so many years on that project. So
How many years?
I think 15 or something like that, you told us, right?
I think on together I worked for about 10 years.
Okay, so when you decided to make the book, somehow you felt that this body of work is finished, and that's like the summing up the project, or are you continuing?
Oh, I see. I'm working now on olive trees. It's be my next book. I've had enough of the city, I guess. I don't know, but I do still carry a camera around the city and take pictures of people. And you don't ever finish a project. Phil Perkins, my teacher, is still taking the same pictures he was taking 50 years ago. In fact, there's a new video which you should watch. Very nice, short, 5-minute video of him. Very deep. Very philosophical. Phil Perkins on video, on Vimeo. By the way, another amazing tool. You could spend weeks watching these things on Vimeo, or, you know, a lot of junk, but there's some amazing stuff. Okay, well, I think you're probably all hungry, and so am I. Thank you.